Welcome to the American Institute of Stress's official podcast, Finding Contentment. The goal of this podcast is to highlight new information about stress and stress management techniques. While we understand that stress is a very personalized issue and different for everyone, we hope to help you find your own way to contentment.
Hey, greetings, everyone. Welcome back to Finding Contentment. This is your host and Executive Director for the American Institute of Stress, Will Heckman. Thank you once again for joining us. I hope you've been joining us in the past and also for all our future podcasts. If you haven't, and this is your first time, you should know that this podcast focuses on stress and stress-related issues. So please remember to follow us on stress.org. And if you have time, send in a review or comment. I love hearing from you guys. And speaking of the American Institute of Stress, hey guys, we need your help. Our mission is to improve the mental health and physical health of the community and the world by setting the standard of excellence in stress management and education, research, clinical care, home life, and the workplace. We educate and credential healthcare professionals and offer products and educational tools for everyone. We also publish 2 magazines. One is called Contentment and one is called Combat Stress, which focuses on vets and also first responders. But we need your help to carry out our mission with a donation. The Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. Your tax-deductible gift allows us to continue helping you along with service members, first responders, civilians, and everyone else navigate stressful situations. And we want you to do that so you can have a happier and more rewarding life. And every dollar is greatly appreciated. There are easy ways to donate it. You could go online to stress.org and make a donation, start a Facebook fundraiser, send us a check. We take money. Give us a call if you really have any questions about that. And by donating to the American Institute of Stress annually, you help support, strengthen, and sustain our legacy in science-based stress management education. And speaking of which, we have some great news. Our long-awaited documentary, Mismatch, Your Brain Under Stress, has been released, and members can see it free on our site. Mismatch is a revolutionary documentary series exploring stress in our society and what we can do about it. Now, stress is literally the spice of life. It has been said that if you don't experience stress, you're not alive. And stressors are everywhere. They come at you from the environment you live, work, and play in, and from other people, and mostly from inside your own head. Stress is defined as our reaction to change. And like everything else, you can learn how to master your stress and live a more peaceful, productive, and happy life. Mismatch Your Brain Under Stress will tell you how. It's produced by the American Institute of Stress, and Mismatch is a 6-part documentary. It's by Justin Smith. It features some of the world's leading experts on stress. Their collective experience stretches from the very first experiments done on the mind-body connection to the very latest research into unraveling the unconscious mind. And as entertaining as it is informative, Mismatch teaches us about what stress is and how to master it. All you have to do is go to stress.org to find out how you can see it. And right now, for colleges and corporate viewing, we have instructional packages, which include lesson plans and quizzes. So make sure you check that out. You know, we're starting to emerge from our homes once again. But lately, and in the recent past, people have been reaching out to the American Institute of Stress for quite a while now, and they tell us that they've reached this tipping point. They have simply had enough of being inside, enough of working remotely, enough of having businesses shut down, enough of schools being closed. Schools just let out, and they're not even sure what they're going to do next year, some of them. But enough of being isolated. They just had enough of the whole thing, the whole shebang. And the most common message or complaint they express is, I just can't do this anymore. Some even break down in tears. The COVID-19 pandemic has transformed all our lives in a multitude of ways. And after such a long period of being stuck inside, limiting exposure to friends and families, missing milestones in our lives, people have missed weddings and births, graduations, and all of that, along with juggling obligations at home and at work, is it any surprise that many people are dealing with overwhelming stress, frustration, anger, and a whole lot more? A lot of people find themselves in a situation where they don't feel like they can handle what's happening anymore. And we've lost motivation to even try. Well, you're not alone. The nonstop tremendous amounts of stress, the increasing of your responsibilities while stripping away your support networks, that's a recipe for burnout. But if you have a choice, you have basically two choices. You can surrender to the pressure and just give up, or you can fight for your career, your life, and your mental health. If you choose the first option, to surrender, well, you're only guaranteed one thing, and that's to fail. The second option, to do something about it, well, that can give you the opportunity to succeed and grow stronger through what you overcome. That old saying, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. But my just saying that we should do something about it doesn't make it easy. I know that. That is why I got in contact with one of the fellows at AIS who just wrote a great article. It's called 6 Ways to Get Your Mind Unstuck While Your Body May Be Stuck at Home. And we will be discussing that and also his book, The Morning Mind. Joining us today is Dr. Robert Carter. Dr. Robert Carter is a colonel in the Army, an expert in integrative human physiology of performance, and has academic appointments in emergency medicine at the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio, and public health and health science at Los Angeles Pacific University, and in nutrition at the University of Maryland. Dr. Carter completed military assignments in Germany, France, Afghanistan, and did a stint in Washington, D.C. and the White House as a military social aide for the Obama administration. And we thank him for his service. He holds a doctorate in biomedical science and medical physiology and a master's of public health and chronic disease epidemiology, and selected as a Yarby postdoctoral research fellow. Dr. Carter received his postgraduate training in environmental epidemiology at Harvard School of Public Health, and he serves on several scientific editorial boards. He's a reviewer of over 14 scientific and medical journals, and he's a fellow of the American College of Sports Medicine and, of course, the American Institute of Stress. And you can find out more about him, because if I keep going on about all the things this man has accomplished, I have an inferiority complex bugging me for the rest of the day. But you can find out more about him. Just go to his website. It's called themorningmind.com, themorningmind.com. You can find out all the things he does and all the things he's involved with, and get a glimpse at his book, which I highly recommend. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Robert Carter. Rob, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. No, this is truly a pleasure, and it's truly an honor to be here with you this morning.
The honor is ours. And if I haven't expressed it enough, thank you for all your service that you've given to this country.
No, thank you.
I wanted to ask you about that. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about is what is your past. Like I said, I could not read your entire resume. It was unbelievable. But what came first? Did the Army come first, or medicine, or did the Army introduce you to medicine? How did this all happen?
Yeah.
Tell us about your journey, man.
Yeah. So they kind of came around the same time. I finished undergrad with chemistry and biology, and had a delayed entry to come on active duty. So my military career and my sort of scientific path have sort of mirrored each other. It's just been a kind of a progressive thing together. And I would say a lot of my early research was sort of driven just by the academic journey, the scientific journey. But over time, there was definitely an influence of obviously my military service on the types of research that I got involved in.
I think a lot of people don't realize, when they picture going into the service, they have this preconceived conceptions in mind, and they don't realize the opportunities that are there giving service to our country. You can do medicine, you can do engineering, you can do a lot of different things. You're living proof of that. I mean, I'm sure that your stints in Germany, France, Afghanistan, and all the different places only broadened your your mind on different things in science.
Yeah, no, you're right. So one of my additional duties in the Army is I serve as the consultant to the Army Surgeon General for physiology and biochemistry. So I help in that capacity, help lay out this kind of strategic plan for the physiologists and biochemists, within the Army, and also help manage their careers. And currently, I have about 120 officers, 110 officers that I help sort of manage that path. And every day I'm even surprised in just the diversity of experiences and expertise that we have within the Army, and then how the Army is able to utilize that expertise, whether it's many of my officers supported Operation Warp Speed in developing the pandemic. I mean, developing the vaccines and countermeasures. Others, support the Department of Health and Human Services. Many of them are embedded in various research laboratories within the Army, within the Department of Defense, and also with other countries, partner countries. So it's just really a unique group that, depending on what's going on, it could be, stress, it could be a wide variety of scenarios, and we're able to really help the nation, help the Army deal with situations, whether humanitarian crisis or conflict. We're able to deploy really experts into those situations to help define the problem and find solutions.
It's just awesome that there's such a myriad of different fields helping people all over the world. I know, I live in South Florida, and I was here for a really bad hurricane. It was Andrew. And I know we're off topic, but I don't care. It's my show. And I remember the devastation that Andrew did, and the Army coming to help. And we had a direct connection. My wife's mom is one of 12 siblings, and 4 of them went to West Point, and one of them came down to help in Andrew. And so we got to pick them up, and we had a 24-hour furlough, and we got to see all the things that they do, and it was just awesome. So let's talk a little bit about your article in Stress and what you do. One of the things you talked about in your recent article is that we should try and reframe a situation in a positive light. Can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by that and how we go about doing that?
Yeah. Too often we get, when we're in a situation, we look at exactly, what's happening. And often there's a negative component to it, and there's an actual positive, component, despite if it's a disaster or something that is potentially, traumatizing, to us, definitely, putting us into a stressful situation. But one of the ways that we have a few different things we can actually do. We can just get caught in a moment. And what happens in that case is that we get into this, almost, you can relate to this, sort of tornado, hurricane, vortex. We just kind of become consumed by what's going on. And where we essentially lose control over our own lives. And again, most situations are impacting us in a way where it's maybe impacting us physically, or is impacting our environment. And most of the time is impacting our environment. It could be something financial, it could be our home. So it's typically external, to our actual bodies. And so basically what I mean by that is, actually, if we are able to retract ourselves from it and remove ourselves from that moment, to basically say, I am not, my bank account, I am not my house, I am not, a family member I'm having problems with. And then begin to look at the situation in a more positive light. meaning that saying that, hey, just by removing yourself and even saying that I am not my house, I am not my bank account, I am not my job, just that will help you begin to see the issue as an issue and not as you. And just by the nature of doing that, you begin to see things in a more positive light, because often people, they may be going through situations where they're losing their job. But then we saw during the pandemic, many people were laid off from jobs or they were furloughed, but they didn't really like the job anyway, and that helped them find a new opportunity. It gave them, they would have never actually pulled themselves away from that job voluntarily, but the situation, forced them to actually produce a career change. And so I'm using that as just one example where, something that seems incredibly, in the middle of a pandemic, you lose your job, and then not, obviously it doesn't happen for everybody. And I'm using that as one example. It can actually help you actually look at things in a more positive way. But actually, everybody has that capacity, and I use the example of, you're throwing lemons and you make lemonade, right? Or you can basically allow the lemons to just rot. And I think, it's really comes from a mindset, no matter what, and the more you practice this, the better able you are to actually see life from a more positive light. In fact, you'll look at every situation as an opportunity. And I think people that live from that space of you can look at every situation as something that's happening to me, even having to wake up and go to work. You can say, oh my God, I woke up another day and I have to go to work. Or you can basically wake up every day and say, oh, this is an opportunity to make a difference, an opportunity to actually, do something positive. And I think, regardless of the situation, sometimes people look at every situation from a negative perspective. And this is really about, regardless of the situation, of looking at it from a positive, and because the nature of our mind is to gravitate to the negative.
Well, I've heard people say that, we have 70,000 thoughts a day and 80% of them are negative.
Yes.
I said, hey, so I got a goal of just getting that 50-50 and I'll be doing a lot better.
Yes.
And you're right, putting things in a positive light is very helpful. In fact, another thing you mentioned is, and I've heard this mentioned a lot of times, I was an athlete as a younger man, and so I've heard this mentioned in sports, and that's positive visualization will increase your likelihood of success. And you talk a little bit about that. So tell us about positive visualization. How do people go about doing that? What is it that makes them succeed? I know in sports what it is. If I can see myself winning the game, I'm more likely to win it. But for people who are not involved in sports, tell us about positive visualization.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned sports. I was an athlete as well in college. I ran the 400 meters. And life
I did too,
is a
but it
sport.
took me 4 days. But it doesn't.
And I think I like your analogy of sport, because life is a sport. Life is a competition. We're in everything we do in life. We're in competition with someone. It could be, at work or just in general. It's a collaboration, but it's also a competition. And so if we look at it from that perspective, the better we're able to visualize a positive future, that actually helps the brain. There's a lot of biochemistry and change that happens within the brain when we look at things from a positive perspective, when we plan it and we visualize success, visualize completing the task, and we visualize the individual steps of how we're going to actually do there. It's almost like we're rehearsing what's going to happen that hasn't happened yet. and as opposed to visualizing something negative, again, you mentioned before, we have, we have 70,000 thoughts, right? So each thought, corresponds to, a rhythm of breathing. It's something that we talk a lot about, so there's this relationship. So how many ever breaths you have in a day, you have that number of thoughts at least. And so one of the ways to offset that, we know that majority of thoughts are going to be negative. One of the ways of doing that is taking action. And really everything that we talk about, simple ways of moving forward, is really taking action, because there's so many passive things going on. So visualizing a positive future, or the positive of visualization, is really one of the ways of taking action. And so all of these intermediate thoughts and steps and roadblocks and negative comments that people are going to give you, one of the ways of bridging that and getting over all of that turbulent activity in your mind and externally, is visualizing a positive future.
That's a great point and a great analogy, that you have as many thoughts as you have breaths, So if you visualize something positive happen, you have a much better chance of it actually happening. It's a very dangerous place to live in your own head, because we have this tendency to visualize things in a negative way. Oh God, this is going to happen. If you take that moment and just say, okay, what if this happens? And it's really good. You have much more of a likelihood of you succeeding, of that happening. That's so true. I wish people would realize that more often. I struggle with it myself. Everyone does. You also talk about something that I'm a big believer in, and that's writing. You said we should, in your article, that you should write down goals for today, maybe one for tomorrow. And I've listened to people talk about journaling a lot, but that basically is narrating. It narrates my life. I did this today, it sucked. I did this today, it was great. And and also this happened. But you talk about writing goals down. How does that help us out?
Yeah, interesting. And this is an area where I would say definitely I've learned probably in the military, and more recently I studied at the Army War College, and we talk a lot about sort of current state and sort of desired end state. And typically, obviously, that's critical in like war fighting. But that's something I was like, that really translates very well to individual lives, right? So journaling or just writing, and some people talk about even creative writing is really good, but something tangible to basically just describing your current state of affairs. Like you could go through, you could talk about maybe financial, or you could talk about personal, or just start with what's easiest for you to visualize as positive, but the bottom line is that even if you can't visualize it being positive, but if you can just describe it, say, okay, and then you have it could be a one sentence statement about your desired end state. So if we take and say, okay, I'm going to describe my financial situation. I'm 100,000 in debt, and I have some amount of money in my bank account. I earn X amount, and my desired end state is to have a positive 200,000. Okay, then that is it sounds like a goal, but it's you're describing your current state and your desired end state, and then what you lay out are a series of goals of how you're going to actually get there. And just by writing that down helps you get unstuck, right? Because think about the level of the mind is that I am 100,000 in debt. I have credit card bills coming in and all of these things, and that gets you into a negative mindset. But just by shifting that neuron and saying, now I can visualize, it goes back to the visualization. I have a new desired end state. And now I've established some small goals of how I'm actually going to get there. That puts you on the path of getting out of where you are. And you may never get to your desired end state, but now you have a mark on the wall, something to go towards. And those small bite-sized goals are going to actually help you get there. And we use the analogy often, you eat the elephant one bite at a time. But when you look at and you have this $100,000 debt and you're trying to, now move to a positive, 200,000 accumulation, that's an elephant. But it's those small goals, okay, of bite size is going to help you get to that end state. And guess what? Start with small end states, the simple things, because the more success and earlier success you can visualize and achieve, then the more likely you are to commit to fixing all the problems you actually have in life, and looking at those not necessarily as problems, as opportunities.
So you don't have to write these grand goals. It could be low-hanging fruit. It could be something very measurable, objective that you can get done today. I think that's a really good advice, because not only do you feel a sense of accomplishment, but it gets your mind off of that. Oh my God, I got to eat that whole elephant. So, something that's doable. It's got to make you feel good, and anything like that can get you, as you say, unstuck, because you get stuck thinking about this massive thing that you have to do called life, guys. If you're, sometimes I tell that to my daughter, that's called life. That's, your air conditioner broke. Yeah, that happens.
Yes.
First thing, here's a goal for you. Find an AC mechanic.
Yes.
So it's little things. We work problems a little bit at a time, and writing down the goals. I do that, in a form of a to-do list, what I need to do today. And they're smaller things, and they add up. At the end of the day, you feel like you have accomplished something. And and the physical connection between writing it down and thinking it makes you more involved in it. It makes it more tangible, So at least I've always found that. I don't know, every generation is different. Now we just tweet it. In your article, you spoke about having a strategy for moving forward. Now, I'm not quite, I was wondering what you meant by strategies. My strategy is to live another day. But what do you mean by strategies? Give us some examples of what people can do, what kind of strategies they can have to keep themselves moving forward.
Yeah. And I think when we talk about I would say strategy, I would, what that looks like is again, whether you write down your strategy or you actually verbalize your strategy. What I mean really by that is really laying out. So we think about goals as and I'll start off with sort of goals always sort of to strategy. But as you described, with your daughter and her air condition situation, the immediate goal is to basically get the AC running. It's out. If she's in Texas, 100 summertime, you need it. But there may be an underlining sort of issue there, right? It could be that developing a strategy to have more reliable transportation, or if you think about something like related to the strategy of work, of employment. So some individuals may be underemployed. They may be, and again, it's obviously a cause of stress. And so the strategy basically is kind of looking beyond the immediate needs. The immediate needs are, I need to eat, I need an AC, I need these immediate, but we're looking, and again, it's that bridging concept that we described earlier, is that, okay, the strategy is looking sort of beyond the immediate, needs, the immediate problems, the immediate, things that's going on right now, and saying, okay, what does a perfect, start off with a perfect day, what is then move to a perfect week, and then you just continue to build on that. And what you find over time is that you begin to live life. Yes, you're living in the present moment. You're experiencing life, for what it is right now. But then you can also see a more positive future. Because one of the things that we described before is that these thoughts, tend to be negative, but this is very passive. And that's the strategy is also part of taking action, moving forward, where you're looking beyond your immediate hunger, for and desire for things that's going on right now, and looking sort of at some point in the future. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're living your entire life, you're fantasizing. It still requires you to actually take action. But that strategy is the bridge between your immediate goals and needs and what life has to offer in the future. It helps you really live that full potential.
I think planning is always a good idea, and it does help keep us moving forward, as you said. The problem that people have expressed to me, and I've had it myself, is that when I make a plan and it doesn't work, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh crap, everything's just sucks. And it's not, it's just, and objectively, if I step aside from it and I do what you say, reframe that situation and just step outside of it a little bit and say, it's only that little thing that's happened in my overall plan.
Yeah.
And that has gone wrong. So the kinds of strategies that you're speaking of are not written in stone, are they?
No, they're not written in stone. And part of the strategy could be, and this kind of goes back to the journaling. I know, some people say, wow, I don't want to write this down because I'm going to fail. Well, you could simply start off, your strategy could be, I'm going to basically write down what I did today. And some people are just there, right? What I did today. And then my strategy could be, I'm going to try and do something, just one of those things a little bit different tomorrow. So it could be just micro steps, right? So maybe someone is attempting to improve their eating, and maybe they tend to skip breakfast, right? They write it down and say, oh, I really wanted to eat breakfast. But the immediate strategy was simply like, I want to make sure I actually eat breakfast tomorrow, and with the overall goal of maybe, having a diet that reduces the overall stress in their body, lowers their cholesterol, lose weight, or achieve some overall sort of, goal. But again, those goals are linked to your overall sort of strategy of being, living healthier, but often, sometimes we have to just start off at the most fundamental, basic level, because what we don't want to do is set ourselves up for failure.
Right.
But again, it goes back to, even if we don't achieve that desired end state, by documenting the small successes can really put us on a path. Because at the end of the day, whether we acknowledge it or not, those the things that we would like to potentially achieve that we don't achieve causes some stress in the system. And it's all about actually doing things to reduce the overall stress in the system. And a lot of the stress we're unaware of, right? So those, 70,000 negative thoughts, it has some degree of stress in the system. And sometimes we don't necessarily see it, but that accumulative stress in the system that we're not acknowledging in the closet results in high cholesterol, increased weight gain, high blood pressure, heart attack, other mental health issues. So we can either ignore those, or we can actually have a strategy of moving forward and addressing those and saying, yeah, and not necessarily seeing, things that don't necessarily happen as planned as being failure, but the actual success is that you've actually acknowledged and you've taken action. And so, yeah.
I was going to say the one thing that we all talk about at AIS is that you should do reframe, positive visualizations, as you say, do stuff to get yourself unstuck. The one thing you should not do is nothing, because if you don't do anything about it, that stress, we're not built, human beings are not built for chronic stress. We're built for acute stress.
Exactly.
That we lived back in the old days and got attacked and ran away and lived another day, but the stress went away. We're not built for stress of a pandemic day after day after day, and that's why we got so stuck, as you put it, in all the things that you've said and wrote about were really very good points. That's really why I wanted to talk to you about it, of moving forward. A lot of people now have to move forward. We were like emerging from this cave of quarantine, and some of us have forgotten how to move forward. All we did for the last year is listen to news tell us how we're all going to die and the pandemic is going to, the world is going to explode in a big ball of flame. Well, no, it's not going to happen, and we are going back to normal. It's just that we have to learn how to do that, something we've never done before.
And I think it's particularly important, there's a lot of discussion in particular with parents and kids, because, as adults, we have a reference point. We have a life of experiences that eventually, we'll figure out a way. But right. The new generation of kids, they already are, have a tendency to not interact as much. And the pandemic may have had a huge impact on them. And also we have to really understand and help the younger generation specifically, see life in a more positive light, because we don't know what impact such an event had on them. We do know, looking back at, the pandemic 100 years ago, it definitely had some negative impacts from a mental health perspective and on that generation that suffered through that the Spanish flu pandemic. Right. And so we have to look at some of those past situations and help this current generation move forward. But I think it's just, as a group, we just have to we just have to move forward and look at what was happening in the past has happened, and really get out and begin to change our lives.
And I think that's happening. I certainly, where I live, things have changed, and people are out more often. And some of my friends who were very germophobic are even coming out of their houses now and and feeling that they can have a social life again. Yeah. School is a very interesting issue, and like you say, kids, I was an educator for almost 30 years. My wife is a teacher. That's a whole other show that we've done a few times about talking all the things that have gone on, and education from kindergarten on up through college, and all the issues that they face. It's one for the books. I mean, there'll be lots of books written about this. As you said, the 1919 pandemic was a very interesting time, and I've read a little bit about that, and we had just come out of a World War II on top of it. So we learned a lot about that, and I kind of think we'll learn a lot about ourselves from this too. It's just not yet, guys. People ask me all the time, well, did this happen and did this happen? We don't know yet. I mean, we're still studying it. Guys like, Dr. Robert Carter is, it's not me, it's him. They're going to study this for years to come and say, hey, you know what happened? And we just got to pay attention. And they'll write about it. Speaking of which, I wanted to talk to you about your book, The Morning Mind. Tell us about it. I read a little bit about it. I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't read the whole book. I know you co-authored it with your wife. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So the morning mind, it was really a birth of understanding what the original title was actually hacking the wizard to silence the lizard. And and what that basically means is that, in fact, we have that theme throughout the book. And it simply goes back to, we have this portion of our brain, we often refer to it as the reptilian portion of our brain, which is, when a situation happens, we have a tendency to just react, much like a reptile. You're in Florida, so you can appreciate, just run in the bushes, and be afraid without analyzing what's going on with the situation. And so in that higher art of thinking of using our whole brain, the wizard, as we refer to it, is basically that helps us, again, reduce stress and live from a more fulfilling life. The morning mind basically lays that framework. And the reason why the book ultimately was called The Morning Mind is because the time of day to start that process of looking at life from what it is, rationalizing and not looking at every situation as someone is attacking you. I think, as we described earlier in the podcast, we're not wired like that. But the way we actually start the morning is the best way to set us up for success. And so the morning mind really lays out a series of strategies. First, we help the reader understand how the brain actually works, and ways, because I think it's critical for everyone to have an understanding of how the brain is functioning. And then that helps us then take advantage of the various tools and techniques of being able to actually have a more fulfilling day. And so the morning mind really lays that framework. And I think the unique thing about the book is that it's all evidence-based, is all driven by science, but it starts off with setting a framework for the reader to understand, at the appropriate level, the basic neuroscience behind stress and how our bodies respond to it. And then we describe some unique examples, like, something that everybody is always, that everybody's experienced, like sitting on a plane that is experiencing severe turbulence, and not being able, the bottom line, you're in a situation that you have zero control over. Some individuals will, almost have a heart attack, and others will say, well, I'm confident the pilot, is, I've experienced this before, and then others will get off the flight and never fly again. and look at the impact of life, right? And so we talk about, like using it as an example. And then we basically talk about, how we can leverage the morning, to capitalize on that. And part of it is my wife and I both teach a lot of breath work and relaxation techniques to vets and other populations. And we always talk about the best time to practice those techniques is actually in the morning, because you can really take advantage of this hopefully restful state that you're coming out of from sleep.
It's funny, but in my capacity as executive director for the American Institute of Stress, I talk to a lot of people, I guess, about, stress. And one of the things that I have learned that works for almost everyone and is breathing techniques. And it's free, guys. And you don't have to carry any special equipment. It's really cool. And it absolutely has helped me. And that's all I can tell you. I strongly suggest that everyone listening take a look at The Morning Mind. They can find it on your website, themorningmind.com, or of course, like everything else on the planet, you can get it now on Amazon. It can be delivered right now. You don't even have to wait. So themorningmind.com, it's a really a great book. Rob, you made a lot of great points today. We could talk about this forever. Unfortunately, we can't talk about this forever. But
Yeah.
I want to thank you for joining us today and taking the time out, and for all you've done for your service and all you do for AIS. I want to thank you, and thank you for doing this podcast.
Thank you. And again, it's truly a pleasure. And it's so important for us to continue to bring awareness. And AIS is really leading the way and bringing awareness of stress and helping, in particular, helping the community identify effective ways of mitigating stress and acknowledging that we all experience stress. So I really appreciate your work as executive director and really leading the charge and champion that critical cause, in particular during situations where we all need it during the pandemic and just doing everyday life. So I appreciate all of your work and being our champion. So we really appreciate it and the opportunity to talk with you today.
Thank you. And that's going to be it for today. This has been your host, Will Heckman. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And please don't forget to follow this podcast, send in those reviews. I always want to hear from you guys. Remember, again, your support is what helps to keep making these podcasts possible. And I want to remind everyone, just as stress is different for each of us, there is no one stress reduction or management strategy that is right for everyone. And that means you need to join us next time as we explore more stress management strategies and insights. And remember to visit us at stress.org to gather information, tools, and techniques to live a healthier, happier, and a longer life. And I hope the information that you heard from Dr. Carter and myself today will help you to find contentment. Good day, everyone.